NCBA wasn't the only organization gathering in Washington. The Public Lands Council also held its legislative conference there as well. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Lane Nordlund has a look at the PLC meeting and some of the key issues that were discussed.
Recently, cattle and sheep producers gathered in Washington, D.C. for the Public Lands Council's spring legislative conference. They talked about issues impacting Western public lands ranchers with elected officials on Capitol Hill.
It's kind of crunch time in any administration. We're midway through. We have a lot of regulatory work underway right now as an industry. We're working on some of our foundational issues, things like the National Environmental Policy Act, the Endangered Species Act, grazing regs. We're working on trying to make progress on long-standing problems like wild horses. We're seeing things like sage grouse sort of come to a resolution point where we'll see how well we did in promulgating new rules on some of those issues. So I think what we saw today in a lot of our committee meetings and what we're hearing, the kind of the theme of this week is the 2-minute drill, getting across the finish line and making sure we secure some of these critical industry priorities during this administration. I think everybody's focused on those goals. And of course, it's always an opportunity to hear about those local issues that folks are dealing with, that our affiliates are dealing with, whether it's bison in Montana and the ever-present threat of the American Prairie Reserve, or whether it's vacant allotments in Wyoming and the Forest Service failing to get NEPA done quickly enough. You know, it's an interesting time to compare all of those and see some common ground. And what was encouraging for me is a lot of the work we're doing at a 30,000-foot level on those high-level regulatory issues is going to lend a lot of support to solving the downstream issues we're seeing on the ground. That's good news for me as an exec, because it tells me that we're focusing on the right key policy areas in order to make some progress for our members and affiliates.
With all the issues that impact public lands ranchers, PLC president and Oregon rancher Bob Skinner knows how important it is for the industry to have a year-round voice in Washington, D.C.
It's very important to know that PLC has really good recognition, especially right now. With the Department of Interior, with the Department of Agriculture, everybody is working with us. It's just a good feeling to know that they're really trying to listen to what we want to do. We are representing the 22,000 permittees in the West, and they're cognizant of that fact, and therefore we have quite a bit of clout.
The PLC Legislative Conference is also a way that public lands ranchers can educate others in agriculture about the importance of the multi-use of public lands.
Obviously, our public land ranchers are so important to NCBA. They really take care of a vast majority of the land that our cattle raise on. And what I tell them all is they have all the same problems the rest of us do, plus an additional many problems as they deal with all the different agencies and the permits. What happens on public land sometimes is a bellwether to what happens to private property rights. So I think we always need to be looking at people that like to tell us how to run our farms and our ranches. They've been telling PLC guys how to run their public lands for a long time, and I think it's creeping over into private property rights. So I think as I'm from the East, so it's been not only interesting to find out the problems, but it tells us something about what we need to be looking forward to and watching out for.
With the spring legislative conference now in the books, PLC will now look to this year's annual meeting, which will be held in the Big Sky state of Montana.
Our annual convention this year is in Great Falls, Montana, and that's our big event. Of course, we get a lot more participation at that, and that is the 25th and 28th of September.
The Public Lands Council represents all of the 22,000 public lands ranchers across the West, being a voice for them here in our nation's capital. Reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, I'm Lane Nordlund.
For more information on regulatory challenges and the issues that impact federal lands and the ranchers that graze there, be sure to visit the website publiclandscouncil.org.